The internet is decaying, right? We can all literally feel it. It's just slowly drowning in this sea of synthetic noise and that algorithm-driven enshittification we all know too well. Now, in previous explainers, we've already covered the need for epistemic AI. We know why we absolutely cannot just leave the question of non-hallucinating AI to the tech bros. I mean, the current state of AI, it might be okay for now, sure, but we all know that's definitely not going to last. The exact same enshittification that took out Usenet and completely consumed the old internet, it has to stop. The theoretical debates, well, they're over. It is officially time for the brick and mortar. So today we are laying down the actual builder's blueprint to fix this whole mess. So let's dive right into this blueprint. We're going to look at the exact structural schematic we're building today. We'll start with the end of enshittification, move into the brick and mortar philosophy, break down the 4 layers of memory, look at the power to abstain, and finally how we democratize this entire thing. All right, section 1, the end of enshittification, stopping the decay. Let's just address the elephant in the room here. If we leave AI unchecked, it doesn't just process info. It actually acts like a mimetic mirror, reflecting and even accelerating the absolute worst parts of our digital ecosystem. It's driving us toward rapid model collapse. Why? Because AI is currently acting as an epistemic intermediary. Basically, language models are standing right between us and the truth. They're shaping what we think is factual, relevant, or uncertain. But the kicker? They're doing this based on commercial optimization. They're optimized to be helpful and super engaging, not necessarily truthful. So when AI-generated text gets silently fed back into future training data without any tracking, bam, we're stuck in a massive closed loop of synthetic noise. Which brings us to section 2, time for brick and mortar, architecture before tools. We're moving from theory to actual physical execution here. The core philosophy of this entire explainer is that architecture must come before the tools. We can't just throw another language model at the problem. Enter this brilliant, kind of playful concept from the source material called the perhapsatron, or the hoplotron. It's named after this early fusion device that actually embraced its own instability. In our blueprint, the perhapsatron is an architectural setup that embraces honest uncertainty instead of faking certainty. It's a system built to look at our messy internet and just deliver a highly calibrated maybe, rather than forcing a confident but completely hallucinated answer. And to build this perhapsatron, we have to structurally split how the AI communicates. Look at this contrast. On one side, you've got the relational channel. This is your warmth, empathy, making you feel safe and heard. But on the other side, we have the epistemic channel. This is hard evidence, doubt, correction, and abstention. Mixing these two up, that is exactly what traps AI into sycophancy and audience capture. The AI wants to be your buddy, right? So it just agrees with your false premise. This blueprint demands a hard, load-bearing wall between the channel that acts like your friend and the channel that evaluates actual truth. Okay, section 3, 4 layers of memory, building the foundation. So, how do we actually construct this thing? Think of it layer by layer, turning chaotic signals into verifiable truth. First up, raw memory. The system just listens, capturing signals completely unfiltered. Next is semantic memory, where it generously associates those chunks of data, just looking for patterns without judging them yet. Then we hit the epistemic memory, or the claim ledger. This is where the real heavy lifting happens. Claims get strictly weighed and evidence is scrutinized. Finally, we cap it all off with procedural memory. This is the rulebook. It basically applies the brakes and tells the system when it absolutely must abstain from answering. Now, to stop that model collapse we talked about, this memory schema relies on some very strict, hard-coded rules. First off, just because a claim went through a procedure doesn't mean it's suddenly a fact. Second, the due weight of evidence, that's calculated on the fly, based on a source's history, not just stored as some permanent number. Third, and honestly this is a massive game changer, provenance propagates as a graph. Think of it like a highly secure chain of custody. It guarantees that AI-generated text can never silently become evidence without a literal receipt of exactly where it came from. Oh, and finally, mu, which means abstaining, is treated as a first-class state, not just an error code.
Which leads us perfectly into section 4, the power to abstain, silence as a virtue.
We have the foundation, right? Now we need the structural walls that stop the system from answering when it just shouldn't. This is all about the mu principle. Mu is the act of abstaining, parking, or totally reformulating a question when the evidence is just too weak. We have to completely reframe what it means to not answer. If an AI says, hey, I cannot answer this based on the evidence, that is not a failure. In our blueprint, that is the system's absolute greatest defense against hallucination. Silence, when it's tracked and logged, is a massive epistemic virtue.
And to prove the system isn't just faking this humility, it has to pass what the sources call the Feynman test. Richard Feynman warned against cargo cult science, basically going through the motions without the actual integrity. Our AI must display visible, verifiable self-doubt. It has to log its failed test results, not just the wins. It has to actively show us that it is trying to figure out how it might be wrong, rather than just imitating uncertainty to appease us. True, calibrated doubt is very, very different from just polite uncertainty.
All right, we are at the final stage of the blueprint, Section 5, Democratizing Epistemic AI, a Federated Ecology. Look, we cannot just rely on a handful of Silicon Valley tech pros to dictate the entire infrastructure of reality for us. We have to distribute this architecture so literally anyone can build with it. To do that, we need an open, federated ecology. Check out the floor for everyone here. By using cheap, accessible tech like Structured Markdown and SQLite, anyone, even just one person on a laptop, can set up a manual rulebook and start weighing claims. Then, we can scale all the way up to the ceiling for the big ones, using Postgres and massive server clusters for automated governance. This means even the smallest personal hubs can feed provable, strictly weighed claims into massive global networks without ever losing that crucial provenance graph. I want to leave you with this really provocative economic reality check from the source material. Is epistemic integrity, like the actual ability to know what is true, going to become a luxury good that only the rich and powerful can afford? Or are we going to build it brick by brick as a shared public commons? By putting architecture before tools, by demanding these provenance graphs, and by embracing the perhapsatron's power to just say, maybe, we actually have a real blueprint to save the internet. The schematic is right here. Now it's time to build.